You are not going to want to miss this conversation with Austin Cooper. He is the founder of Sober Evolution. He's also working with Coalition Recovery, which is a treatment center in Florida. I really can't wait for you to have a chance to go a little bit deeper with Austin. He really goes deep into his story. I think you're going to really get a lot out of this. And let's go. Let's go on for the ride.
Here, we want to show you what's possible in the world of sobriety. We introduce you to the various tools, programs, and resources available, because there are way more options than you may even realize. We want you to find the one that works for you.
And we do it through people. People who share their pathway to recovery and will help you find your path to freedom. Because getting sober can feel hard enough. You don't have to do it alone. I'm Sarah Roberts.
And I'm Roger DeVoe, and this is Sobriety Starts Here.
All right, let's get started. I cannot wait for you all to listen to this conversation with Austin Cooper. Austin, thank you so much for being with us today. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about what you guys are doing over there, and it really is an honor to be invited to this, so thank you.
Oh, it's our honor, truly. I mean that. I've been following you for a while now, and the work that you're doing in the recovery space is powerful stuff. You are changing lives. You're getting the attention of celebrities, and 2020 is talking about the sober revolution and all of this stuff. So before I give everything away and before we get too far into it, let's get to the meat of the matter. I really wanted to have you on to talk about treatment centers, because you do have experience with that pathway to recovery. And we're going to get deeper into your story a little bit later. But let's start talking about, in your experience, so what is a treatment center and who is it for?
Sure. So a treatment center is a place to help you get out of the habits of using substances. And so it's, where you're surrounded by these professionals who know what they're doing, and they spend their life and passion helping people with substance abuse issues and alcohol abuse issues. So, it ranges from detoxing to inpatient to partial hospitalization to intensive outpatient and outpatient, and then, long-term recovery programs from there. So it's a very wide range of things, but they're all just there to help us get healthy and rebuild our lives.
So when we hear about treatment centers, a lot of us have that standard, image in our minds of the Betty Ford Center. I know that one's got so much notoriety, and it's the place where a lot of celebrities go, and we have that sort of image of it's on a beach and it's this beautiful place and people stay there. I understand that there is, we've got inpatient treatment, we've got outpatient treatment. Can you share a little bit about the differences between those two?
Yeah, of course. So the inpatient is where you are a resident of that treatment center. And so, you're being looked after 24/7. And, there's a lot of health issues that can come along with, the withdrawals of certain drugs and alcohol. And so it's very important. And that's what I actually went to, is an inpatient treatment center, to have that 24/7 supervision. The days are completely filled with everything recovery related and treatment related. And then the outpatient typically is where you graduate to afterwards. And that is more where you can either live, at home and attend daily, or however often these outpatient, programs operate. Or you can live in their residences and then have transportation back and forth to, get the weekly or daily even groups and therapy. And there's things all over the place, such as massages and yoga and acupuncture, acupressure. The list really goes on with some of the amenities that you get with that.
It's so amazing to think that people that are really struggling, it must feel like for a lot of people that this is the first time that maybe ever that they've ever really focused on themselves, that they've ever really taken the time and the effort to go deeper with themselves. But I wonder, what is the experience for somebody who comes into treatment? Let's say they are not coming willingly. Let's say that the family, or it's been an intervention situation where the family has brought the individual in. what is your experience now that you work in a treatment center, of that, the difference between the person coming in willingly versus the person coming in sort of kicking and screaming? What is the success rate, if you can share that, if you know?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on the treatment center itself. And of course, the approach that, say, your family or friends take to help you get there. Of course, sometimes it's court related and you have to go to treatment. And again, it kind of boils down, I think, to what kind of treatment center are you going to? Do they either have experience, or do they have, staff members with experience, or do they just have a really solid program? I think that's always the most important thing to search for. And, in my experience, I had an intervention. So I went through it that way. It was out of the blue. It was, you're going to treatment, or, my family was going to have to kick me out. And, of course, I luckily chose to go to treatment. And, the fears start boiling up and everything, what else is going to change? But, once I got there and realized that this was my opportunity to really change my life around, that's when things kind of changed. And I started listening and realizing, that I had to almost throw away everything I thought before and kind of reframe my state of mind and philosophies on life, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. So if you're somebody out there that's watching this right now and you're thinking about, looking into treatment centers because this is a way that you think that will work for you, or you've been curious about it, how would one decide what to look for? How would we go about choosing from all of there are thousands and thousands of different treatment centers across the US and Canada and the UK and all over the world. How do you go about choosing one that's right for you? What would you look for?
Well, really, there's all sorts of treatment programs. There's now evidence-based treatment programs, which are more focused on some of the scientific findings and, of course, the success rates that they've seen. And I, personally think that those are obviously the most progressive treatment centers. And so I'd make sure that there is some sort of evidence-based in there. But there's also, 12-step focused treatment centers as well. I know a lot of people coming into treatment are looking for treatment, say the second time, or they have experience with 12 steps and it's not something that worked out for them. Definitely look more into the evidence-based treatment programs. I think that's kind of where I'm at with that. The evidence-based, there's all sorts of things, and that's where you're going to find more, I think, of those amenities that really heal yourself as a whole instead of just focusing on the addiction itself.
So I guess what you're saying is really look into what they offer and decide if it's a holistic approach to treatment versus a 12-step based approach. Like, is it kind of like evidence-based or 12-step, and you have to choose between the two?
Well, there's some that are a mix. A lot of them are, and they give you options to figure out what works best for you. And for some people, that 12-step approach is what works best for them. And so I think, having those options and opportunities to kind of figure out what is best and, be able to move forward from there. And so I definitely think that's such an important part. Of course, look into the staff and see if those people have experience in recovery themselves. I always find that as very important. I'm not saying every staff member has to be in recovery. Of course, there's therapists who aren't, but that are very knowledgeable about it. I just think, finding those places that have people who are knowledgeable and also people with experience is very important.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. I think if I were somebody, and I was chatting with your partner Lara Frazier about treatment centers, and I was saying, man, I want to go to one now. Like I've been sober a long time, but man, I would love to take some time out of my regular life, 30 or 60 or 90 days, to focus on myself and to go within and to really get the kind of treatment that is offered at these centers. I just think that it sounds incredible, but I imagine if somebody had, staged an intervention for me, or if I was, persuaded to go to a treatment center, I don't know if I would have been so open to everything. So I wonder, how do you think that we get people who might not be even thinking about quitting drinking. Like, I was not somebody who was ever wanting to quit drinking when I quit drinking. And so how do you think that people might get a family member on board, or even considering looking at websites or checking out treatment centers if they're really resistant?
Well, in my case, before I ever, had that intervention, I actually saw someone on social media who I knew had a major problem, and that was before I admitted that I did. But I saw he went to rehab, and then I started seeing him really build his life and start accomplishing these incredible goals. Some of those goals were goals that I had in my own life. And I think, on my way to rehab, I kind of understood that, this was my opportunity to do basically the same thing that that person did. And, I know that a lot of people say, one day at a time, but I've always been very driven by the future. What are my possibilities in life? And, I was able to really look at the fact that, I was spending so much time either drunk, high, or hungover. What if I allocated that time towards something productive? And what could I do with my life? What would my next year be like if I started focusing on building myself personally, so personal development. I had these business goals in my life. What if I started focusing a lot of time on that? What can happen? I think understanding that this can be, as J.K. Rowling said, the foundation on which she rebuilt her life was at rock bottom. And, I think that quote for me did a lot, and it really got me excited about the future. I knew there was going to be obstacles, treatment. I might have, some withdrawal symptoms that really are not fun. But the fact is, it's only temporary. And then after that, you get to spend your time building your life. So I think getting excited about the future can really be a big motivator.
Oh, I really connect with that. Getting excited about your life and being motivated by that is powerful. And I think it's really interesting. Now, I'd like to delve a little bit deeper into your story, because I think it's really cool that you talk about the fact that you were you were inspired by somebody else that you saw getting sober and rebuilding their life and becoming who they were really meant to be. And so I can only imagine how many people you've inspired, Austin, by being the change that you wanted to see. So I love that it's that hand up. It's, that pulling that person behind you. And you're definitely doing that with the work that you're doing. So that's awesome. So I would love that to get into a little bit of your story. Why don't you share with us a bit about maybe your childhood? Take us back to some of those earlier ages and work our way through to when you did end up getting, having the family intervene and going to treatment and then changing your life. So I'd love to pass the microphone over to you.
All right. Well, yeah, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and I lived there up until a year and a half ago. I was always a very social kid growing up in elementary school, early elementary school. I had a lot of guy friends, a lot of girlfriends. I was always active, things like that. But I remember when I was kind of transitioning from elementary school to middle school, that's when people started kind of picking on people a little more. And, I remember getting picked on, and it was just that one little time. And if you heard that story, it would be like, what's the big deal about that? But really for me, I had never been picked on before. My family always told me how great I was, how handsome I was. And that's all I heard. And so the first time I got picked on, I started doubting myself, and I became extremely insecure, very closed off. I built up, these walls, and, it was really tough, and I just hated myself for it, and I realized when I was 15, I tried drinking alcohol, and just from that first little buzz, I realized that this made me very open and outgoing, and it broke down these walls, and my insecurities were behind me. And so right from that first moment, that was like it was as if it was my elixir to solve those insecurity issues that I had.
I think so many people can relate to that. Sorry to interrupt you, but I really know how many of us, I have that same story where I felt insecure. I felt picked on. I felt other. I felt always marginalized. I was never in the in crowd. I always wanted to fit in. And that first time drinking at age 15, all of a sudden the whole world just changed for me. And it was like, I can fit in now. I can do this. I'm curious because I think people might want to know, because I do too. What were you picked on for? What was that thing that people bugged you for?
So, towards the end of sixth grade, I was really unhealthy. As a kid, I was just eating horrible foods and, overeating. And so I got a little chubby. I had, a chubby phase. And I remember we were sitting at what was called a Friendly's, this little diner in Worthington, Ohio. And I was with my friends. Some of them were, athletic. We had some of our girlfriends there. And the girls were commenting on how buff this one kid was. And, my mom had always told me that I was buff and that I was handsome. And I kind of stepped in, I'm like, and almost jokingly, but said, what about me? I'm buff too, right? And they're like, no, you're not buff, you're just fat. And it just tore me to pieces. I wanted to rip the fat off of my body. And, it just completely destroyed my confidence right in that point. And, a couple other times that happened too around that time, which just reinforced that and made it worse.
Wow, I'm so sorry that you had that experience. And I know you're not alone. I know a lot of people watching and listening are going to relate to that, that there was that one time where somebody called them a really nasty name and all of it. And that was sort of, it stuck, it felt like it was true. And you wore that shirt, like you wore it like it was true. And we do that as kids. We take on what other people think of us. And it's really hard as a young child to not take it on as the truth. So, all right, continue. Keep going with your story. I'm loving it.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, I remember, I think I was 16 and I tried marijuana with my group of friends. And I was fascinated at the differences between the high of marijuana and the drunk of alcohol. And at that point, I remember in my head deciding, I want to try everything. I want to see, what the experience is like for everything. So I really wasn't throwing anything out the door at that point. And I got more and more involved in partying. And, that started building up my confidence because I was able to talk to the people that I wanted to talk to. I was able to hang around, the popular group. I was able to talk to girls again, and it just, that kept reinforcing me wanting to drink alcohol and use other drugs. And so, marijuana, then there was cocaine, and it, went to some hallucinogens, ecstasy, things like that, that brought me outside of my comfort zone. And, I started just completely prioritizing my life around it. That was the only thing that mattered because I was having fun with these group of people that I wanted to have fun with. And, I wasn't getting picked on, at all. And so it really made me feel good. But everything else fell by the wayside. I mean, my grades started plummeting. I was constantly procrastinating. I wasn't, finishing homework. I wasn't studying in time. And that went all the way into college. And I, because I procrastinated, I wasn't able to apply for Ohio State University in time. And so I ended up going to Columbus State, the community college there. And, that actually, it was really bad because I realized I didn't have anyone, watching me go to school or not. So I had this freedom where I could choose not to go to class if I wanted to. I didn't have to do my homework. Who was going to, figure that out or call my parents? No one. And so I took full advantage of that. And that's when I was, drinking more during the day. I was, partying more than I had ever partied, up until that point. And I eventually dropped out of college. I was unable to hold my grades up, and so they requested that I dropped out, and I did. I somehow got a pretty decent job. Really, it was because it was from an employer that knew my father. It really wasn't anything that I wanted to do. It was in engineering. My dad's an engineer. My whole, family are a bunch of engineers, but I was never interested in that. But I figured, this is a good opportunity. So I started kind of working as an intern during when I was at Columbus State, and then I dropped out without telling them. And then eventually I went back to Franklin University, which is also in Columbus, Only this time I was paying for it in hopes that it would motivate me more to go to school. But again, I was so entrapped just in that black hole, or that, vortex of addiction. And I didn't, up until that point, I didn't really know much about addiction at all. I just thought this was how every college student was.
Yeah.
And, but I ended up dropping out of school for the second time, only to be left with, student loan debt that I'm still paying off today. But it started hitting me, especially when my friends were graduating college and getting jobs, started to hit me that, like, I can't go back in time and fix this. I thought I was screwed at that point.
Like you
And
were
so
feeling
that's
left
when,
behind, like you were feeling like they were all advancing and you were still.
right,
Yeah. I want to ask
exactly.
you, where were your parents? So I know sixth grade, people were bullying you and you dealt with all of that. Did you share any of that with your family, or did you keep that inside? And then where was your family sort of in high school and then college and all of that? Like, were they aware of what was going on with your addiction progressing?
Well, after getting picked on the couple of times, I'd bring it up to my family, but of course they tell me, no, you're handsome, no, you're buff, we love you. And, I knew, of course, that's what they're going to tell me. They're my family. So why am I bringing up to this to them, even if I am, out of shape, even if I, do have a weight problem? They're not going to tell me that. And so, I kind of started holding things in at that point because I didn't know who to talk to, who had maybe been through the same thing. And that wasn't my family. So I think that's a major issue, with all of society, is that, family is the last people we really want to come forward to, because we know what we're going to hear from them, instead of having these other people with experience with the same things. It's almost as if there were no resources back then. I know there are resources now, but being a kid, we were never taught of any resources in school to go to in cases like that. So yeah, that's where I really started holding things in at that point. And
That's interesting. I find that's a really common thread with a lot of us in recovery. A lot of people who have dealt with addiction is that so much of the time we hear that it's all about pushing that pain down, pushing those stories down, because we don't want to share because we're embarrassed or we're ashamed, or we just, like you say, we kind of know what our family's going to say. So what's the point in sharing with them? But we do understand now that we're in recovery, we've got to share that stuff. We've got to let it out.
yeah, you got to take that leap of faith, is really what it is. And the only time that I ever took that leap was really when I agreed to go to treatment. That was the first time. But
Okay,
then
so
you realize, oh,
so
sorry.
obviously your parents at some point realized that there was a problem. So let's pick back up where you were telling us that your friends were all kind of advancing and you were like, what the heck am I doing over here?
Yeah, and my parents did know at that point that I was dropping out of college, because I wasn't going. I was, basically failing out of it. And my parents would try to have these sit down talks with me. So they'd invite me over, have me sit down, and start telling me things like, Austin, like, we see that, your partying is really getting in the way. It's causing you to fail out of school. We think you need to look for new friends, things like that. Because a lot of the association, they were partying too. And I just wasn't able to admit that I was the one who was kind of going a lot further than any of them. But, every time I would have these sit down talks, it would just trigger me to get very defensive. And, it was really me just acting as a little child does. And, that's because I wasn't developing mentally to understand that they were just speaking the truth. And so I would become overly defensive. I would storm out of the room. I would just go and drink more, almost out of spite. And so they just, they would keep trying those things, and it just would never work. It would never click with me. And I didn't want to lose my group of friends or anything. I didn't want to give up partying. Like, that was a thing that made me feel good. So, that just continued and continued. Eventually, I was spending all of my money, every single bit of it. That first weekend after getting the paycheck, it was gone. And so I was unable to pay my bills, and my family, they were helping out a little bit. But eventually I had to move out of my apartment and move back into my family's house. I had a bedroom in the basement, and I was so torn to pieces and ashamed of that, because all of my other friends, were renting places, getting ready to buy houses. And I was, 23 at that point, living in my parents' basement. And that's when I started really isolating. And my mom later on told me, she's like, it was as if a stranger was living in our basement, because you would come home from work or whatever you were doing, go straight to your room. And, they didn't realize what I was doing in there until, after I was in treatment, but they found, you know, 50 empty bottles of whiskey, an empty container that contained uh, opiates, and pills, and leftover blunts, and just marijuana seeds laying everywhere, remnants of cocaine. And that's what I was doing with all of my time, because I wanted to forget about the fact that I wasn't advancing in life, and I failed out of school basically, and I had to move home. I wanted to forget all of that, and the only thing that seemed to temporarily solve that issue was just getting obliterated out of my mind, doing whatever I could to just forget and numb that pain.
Yeah, I think so many people can relate to that. So what would you say was your drug of choice out of all of those options that you had?
Well, the thing that I enjoyed most, because it numbed the most pain, were the opiates. I think it was like Oxycontin, something like that. But the thing is, I couldn't afford it. And so I just really had a short stint of that. And I remember stealing my dad's pain pills that he had left over from a surgery, and, almost killing myself. I mean, I would wake up without breathing. I would wake up because I wasn't breathing, and then I would just go and snort more of it. I would leave my door unlocked, because I knew that I could die from this very next use, and I didn't want my family to have to break down a door to find me dead. Instead, just open the door.
Oh
So
my.
that was my thinking, but that numbed the pain the most. But the thing I had most access to was alcohol, and so I'd say that was my primary drug of choice, was alcohol, because I could get blackout drunk, by myself in my room, pass out, and then wake up the next day. And then, either I was barely going to work at that point, so I just spend the entire day, getting drunk. And so, yeah, I'd say alcohol was, but my preferred method would be the opiates, and definitely marijuana too. That seemed to numb some of the pain as well.
Wow. So when was it that your family finally kind of got wise to what was going on, and or got the guts? I think it takes a lot of courage for a family to come together and stage an intervention. So how did that all play out?
Yeah, so close to 5 years ago, I guess my family decided to meet with an interventionist, and they worked for, not sure how long, a few weeks, probably, maybe a little longer than that. But they provided reading material for my parents, and different resources to look into, and they had to keep everything completely silent that whole time, so I wouldn't find out anything or suspect anything. So I didn't. They did a very good job at that. And I remember one day, it was April of 2013, I was called in from my boss to go to a meeting with him. I thought that was a little odd, because I hadn't been to a meeting with my boss in a long time. But, of course, I went with it. We arrived at a building. It didn't seem like an engineering building, so I was a little confused. I walked into this building and was greeted at the door by someone saying, "Are you Austin Cooper?" And I said, "Yes." And my eyes lit up. And I was like, this is probably a law firm, and I'm being sued because I'm not working and I'm getting paid for it. So my heart was racing at that point. I remember she led me to another door. They opened the door, and it was as if everything was in complete slow motion. I mean, I remember it like it was yesterday. And I saw my mom sitting there, the very first thing. And for some reason or another, I knew that this was an intervention in that split second. And I don't know why, because I was never a spontaneous person before then. I would never take a leap of faith, and I didn't really understand how, decisions are made in such a split second. Otherwise, those decisions don't really follow through. But for some reason or another, I knew that I only had a short amount of time, say 5 seconds, to decide yes or no in my head. Otherwise, I was going to say no, I was going to back down, and I was going to continue destroying my life. So, really, before that door even fully opened, I knew this was an intervention, and I knew that I was going to go to it. So, that's what happened. We all sat down in a circle, and I told my family, I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I know that I can't continue like this anymore, or I'm going to kill myself, and I'm going to destroy this family forever, and obviously destroy my life at that point. And they still wanted to read me these letters that they had written out over the previous few weeks. And it was good for me, because it reminded me of the happy child I once was growing up, and this loving kid and this incredible family member. My sister, reading her letter about me being this amazing big brother to her growing up, but then going deeper into, I don't recognize you as my brother anymore, because you're completely different from who you used to be. She's like, I know you always wanted to be a good big brother, but she's like, I don't have that brother to, protect me and teach me and look up to anymore. And then they would, talk about the future. This is your opportunity to rekindle all of those relationships and rebuild your life. And the difference in this conversation from the, other sit down conversations that we would have, is that they offered to work with me as a team towards rebuilding my life and building it in an incredible way. We want to support you in accomplishing not just your goals, but your dreams in life. And that was like, they want to be my teammate. They want to be my friends. They want to help me. And I think
this was your parents saying this, that they wanted to be your teammates and your friends and doing all of that?
Exactly. And that was the difference.
And I feel that was the difference. And it makes me think about all of the different times my parents would sit me down and say, even though I drank more with my parents than I did with a lot of my friends. So we were a drinking family, but some of those conversations, maybe that was part of it, that I would listen to them and think, what do you know? You guys are drinking too. So I wouldn't really heed that message. And I wonder if for people out there that are parents that are trying to talk to their kids, I think that this intervention training, even just having that chance to write those really heartfelt letters, like even just learning to do that part of it, I think would be really powerful, even if somebody doesn't end up taking that next step and going to treatment, but just having that same perception that your family is now you're on your team. I think that's such an important piece here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, every time I have a conversation with a mother or a father of someone who's struggling, I always mention that, because that was really, I think, the difference that, changed my life. And, in that they even agreed to get rid of all their alcohol out of the house. They weren't going to drink in front of me, and they were going to make changes in their own life to help me build my life. And that was like, wow, I mean, they're completely willing to change things around in their own lives, start new habits of their own, start being more active. And, it was like, well, that's really going to help encourage me to be more active in building my life and building my health and building my future.
Oh my gosh, I definitely want to get into the health and fitness piece of it, because I find what I'm now knowing, and I didn't know that you were bullied for being chubby or when you were a kid. And so I think that that's a really important part, I know, of your recovery has been the health and fitness. But let's keep going. So you're in the intervention, you're in this building, you're in this room, they want to be your teammate, you've already decided you're going. Then you go to treatment. So tell us or keep going wherever you want to pick back up there. I want to keep hearing this story. It's awesome.
Yeah. So, at that point it was like, all right, like, let's like just dig our head through these obstacles that are going to come up. I knew it wasn't going to be this amazing, easy thing. It was going to be tough. But this was my chance to be the toughest I had ever been in my entire life. And it was almost like setting myself on this mission. It was almost like, Lord of the Rings, where they're willing to climb these mountains and go through, these awful places, face these, crazy beasts, just to do this one thing for the greater good. And that was kind of the state of mind I got in. It's like, you know what? No matter how sick I get, no matter how horrible I feel, I'm doing this because, over this mountain is going to be this amazing, landscape for me to really choose which path I want to go towards building my life. And so I started like hyping myself up, like, let's do this, let's just do it. And that got me excited. Of course, fears started building up when I was on my way to the treatment center. But I kept reminding myself, this is, a mission to really better my life. I only get one opportunity at life as far as I know. And I don't want to be, 90 years old on my, deathbed, regretting that I didn't make changes and, regretting that I didn't get to reach for these incredible goals that I've always had in my life.
Was
So,
that what was going through your mind when you were in the vehicle, going to the airport, going to the treatment center? Or is this stuff that you've been able to put together after you've come out the other side?
no, all of that was on my mind on the way to my treatment center. It was, my future was definitely on my mind because I knew I had to hold on to the possibilities that I had in life in order to get through the obstacles that I was about to face. And, of course, on that way, I was thinking, oh my gosh, like, I'm not going to get to go to that party this weekend. And I was like, wait, I'm not going to get to go to the party the next weekend either. And then I'm like, oh, wait, I'm completely changing course in life to where that's just not going to be part of my life anymore. So I knew that, just from seeing others who have been in recovery before really enjoying their lives, I knew it was possible to enjoy life without the things that I had been, using for so long. I've just got to figure out how to reach that point and enjoy life without partying and doing drugs and all of that. So,
So you had
that
so you had looked into that fellow that you were following while you were still using? Like that was, so you were starting to think about this stuff before the intervention was staged?
Yeah, I mean, I remember wondering in my head, if I too were to give up alcohol and drugs, and I were to spend my time on those things, building my life, going towards my goals, kind of becoming a nerd almost, and studying how to get to those places. I thought of that, and so it almost was like a light bulb in my head. But still, I was too afraid to ask for help. I, hadn't admitted that, I was an alcoholic or I was an addict of any sort. I hadn't admitted that to myself, but I wondered in my head, if I gave up completely drinking and using drugs and I used my time wisely, what would my possibilities be? So that was definitely on my mind. And that was months before, I ended up going to treatment.
I think that's amazing because I know a lot of people, myself included, when I would, be hungover and sort of on the couch and thinking, what the hell am I doing with my life? I know that I would have thoughts like that, that this is not the way that I want to be doing it, but I just didn't know of another way. And I didn't want to put the work in because I figured that it would be way too much work and I was scared to do that. And, but I know that for a lot of people, they're connecting with what you're saying, where it's that whisper, that in the quiet moments, in that time between the craving and the action of using, that a lot of us have that moment of, I know that this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing, but I got to do it anyway because I don't know another way right now.
Yeah, it's, just being lost, without knowing of resources, and, the thing is, we all have that, we all have human instinct and we know what we need to do and what we shouldn't be doing. It's just not always easy to follow that. And, right from the get-go, when I was in the treatment center I was at, those were the things that we were learning. Like, learn to trust your instinct and just go for it, without worrying about the consequences. Just think about, what your future is going to hold if you follow that instinct.
Wow, it sounds like it was such a great treatment center for you. It feels like it was very aligned with your goals already. You were entering into that intervention with those thoughts going through your mind right away within those first few seconds, like you talked about, and then entering treatment and having that philosophy sort of laid out. I imagine that that's a big reason why you were successful in treatment like you did you relapse after treatment?
No, that
Yeah.
was my only time in treatment.
Yeah.
And, ever since I haven't touched alcohol, I haven't touched a drug. And I'm just so far away from that now that it just doesn't even cross my mind.
No. So
Um,
so tell us about treatment. So you get there and you arrive and walk us through what it feels like to be in treatment and how that looks.
Yeah, so well, first walked in the door. It's funny because I, had my button-up shirt on and my dress pants for the job that I had. But walked in there. They didn't think, I was coming in there because I was the one who needed help because of the way I was dressed. But all the paperwork processing, drug test, all of that good stuff, and then finally going. My parents left. I went upstairs, and that's where a big group of people were all sitting in this almost living room. It was, I think, break time at that point. And people just started coming up to me and saying, "Hey, my name is so and so. It's nice to meet you. We're glad you're here." And these were the patients that were coming up to me and saying that and saying, "Congrats, you're doing something amazing for yourself. We're all here for each other. If you need anything, let me know." And I was like, this is unbelievable. These people I don't even know are coming up to me and offering to help me and guide me and be there for me and basically be my friend. I had never felt so welcomed anywhere in my life other than, going to that treatment center, which was just kind of mind blowing. And it wasn't like this lavish, it wasn't a lavish, there was no pool or, in my mind, when I had the intervention, I actually thought of the show Intervention, where these kids go to like Malibu treatment centers. There's palm trees, pools, there's a beach, people are in bathing suits, always having, this relaxing, amazing time with, yoga and acupuncture. Okay, this had none of it. I mean, this was really just, it was almost like a rundown motel, but everybody was there for the reason of coming off or getting away from, the drug lifestyle and the drinking lifestyle. And, it was just such a welcoming community. It didn't matter what the rooms looked like. I didn't care where I was sleeping. Like, this was now my core group. And we're all in this together. We're a team, and we're all going to help each other out, build each other up, etc. And
That's
so, yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
That is
that's my
so cool.
first.
Walk us through a typical day in treatment. What happens? You wake up, I know it's very regimented, which is important, but tell us what a day looks like.
Yeah, so this one was more focused on 12 step. And I didn't know anything, really about 12 step, other than there's meetings outside of this. But anyway, they also had therapists and group sessions. So really, I mean, we'd wake up at, 6 in the morning, which, I was not an early bird. But again, I had that same frame of mind that the struggle's only temporary, the benefits come afterwards. I'll get used to it. So wake up 6 a.m. We'd have breakfast, and of course, at the time I smoked cigarettes, so we'd have a 10-minute smoke break, something like that. Then you'd go into a meeting, and then you'd have a break, and then you'd go right into a group session. You'd have a break. You'd go into something else, and then you'd have lunch. And every hour was really filled with something productive. And so you would have therapists come in. You'd have different speakers who have been sober for X amount of time, years. And what was amazing to me, and I think this is kind of, it's different and it wasn't normal, but I brought a pen and paper. I wanted to study everything these people who had what I wanted in life were doing. And some of these people were business owners, they were real estate agents. They had really built their lives in their recovery, and that really got me excited. So I wanted to know everything they were doing. Not everybody was in 12 step. Some used coaching, some just used business mentors, and they taught me really that the principles of success are universal. Whether you're doing 12-step, whether you're, just focusing on, recovering yourself as a whole, holistic approaches, whether you're trying to become an athlete, whether you're trying to build a business, the principles of success are all the same. So just pay attention to those pieces of wisdom and kind of organize those principles to realize that they are really all the same. And so that's what I was doing, just notes and notes and notes. And occasionally we'd have recreation hour. There's a crappy basketball hoop in the back, soccer balls, footballs, things like that. Yeah, I mean and we would associate with each other and form these friendships and talk about our lives and our experience, and realize it doesn't matter if someone, their drug of choice might have been heroin and someone else might be marijuana. We're still all there for the same purpose of bettering our lives. And so we have that. It's such a common bond that's so hard to explain, but I've never seen it anywhere else in this world. I'm sure there are other, common bond people, but I just think anyone who has hit some sort of bottom and is getting out of that and building their lives, there's such a common bond there. We all have that respect. And so that was, the typical day, talking about those things and going through these groups and meetings and lunch and dinner. And then, I think at night we'd watch a movie or something, and then go sleep in our beds and start the next day. It was, pretty much the same over and over.
How long were you there?
I was there only for 22 days. Typically, I think people would stay for 28 days. And then you could do IOP, the intensive outpatient, or just outpatient after that for, I think, 60 to 90 days if you wanted to. But I did the 22 days. I think that's all my insurance would cover. I think that's why they let me go. Plus, I think they really saw me progressing because I knew that alcohol, drugs, those are going to destroy my life, period. So let's just leave that behind and let's just figure out how to have fun and enjoy life. So I really had, in that amount of time, accepted that I was never going to touch alcohol, never going to touch drugs again. Let's just figure out how to build my life from here. That's all I got to do. I know that I'm going to have struggles in life and times are going to be hard. I might get, sad or depressed or have to grieve certain situations, but I can get through those too and keep living my life and keep helping other people build my life.
And do you think that's because of the tools that you learned from the therapists and from the case managers and from the people coming in, or was it more internal with you that you made that decision?
I mean, I think it's hard to say. I mean, I think it was a little of both, because it's just 100% obvious that alcohol and drugs were destroying my life. And I just no longer wanted to destroy my life anymore, period. And so, that was kind of the inside part. But then, of course, through the talks and the therapy and everything, I started learning more about, how to have fun and enjoy life and start, accomplishing goals. And that's what got me excited, and, definitely pushed me further in that. But I think the deep down inside part, I knew that I'd have to start looking at the facts instead of just what I wanted to look at. And the facts are all there and they're all drawn out. There's no way around it. If I have a sip of alcohol, I could be throwing my entire life away. I don't care if I have 20 years, I'd be throwing my entire life away with one sip of alcohol because I have, as a fact, this addiction. So, I just became very, I think, logical in that moment, instead of trying to hide that by, getting drunk or high.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can feel that. And I'm thinking though, even today, do you feel that if you were to have a drink, do you think that you would be able to come back from that? Or do you still have that feeling that it's absolutely a deal breaker for you?
Well, I'd never really think about it, but I guess if I do, I might be able to, handle a drink and get right back on track. I might be able to, but even if there's a 0.0001% chance that it might screw up the rest of my life, it's just not worth taking. And so I just don't even sweat it. And, I've been able to build my life so much in the past almost 5 years that, like, why would I even want to risk it? It doesn't matter if I might be able to handle it. I don't need it anyway. It's alcohol, it's poison. I mean, it literally is poison. And then drugs, poison as well. And so why do I want to, poison my body?
I relate to that so much because I recently had somebody telling me that I simply have a belief system wrapped around my my addiction, and if I want to be able to have a glass of wine, I can do that. And this person was able to do that, and so they were going to show me how. And it was like, I don't want that lifestyle. I don't want it anymore. I don't want to figure out how I can navigate this whole other way. And like you, it's like you build your life up in such a positive way. Why even go there? I mean, it just becomes, the lifestyle of being in recovery is so empowering. It's so powerful, and it's so important. It feels so good. Why would I bother ever trying to figure out ways that I might be able to have a glass of wine now and again? It's just not interesting to me. And I don't believe that anyway. I really don't believe that. If I don't know. For me, it's a tough one because I'm sure there are people out there that have been able to overcome in a way that allows them to moderate. For me, that was not my story. So yeah.
Yeah, and 99% of the time that I've seen in my 5 years, I've seen people who have had 20 years, and they decided to moderate, and they were able to do it maybe for 2, 3, 4 years, but with the addictive personality and addiction itself, things started spiraling over time to where they were worse than where they ever were before, 20 years earlier. And, I have to understand that I do have this addiction and I do have an addictive personality. So even if I could handle it for 5 years, it's not worth me going right back to rock bottom, period. And, I've just seen it way too many times, and I still see it today, where people with all of this time and have built their lives, and they're maybe financially successful, and so they never have to worry about a bill again for the rest of their life, decide to have a glass of wine once a week. Might work out for a bit, but then time and time again I just keep seeing it where something will come up, maybe a minor trauma or a tragedy or something like that, and all of a sudden the self-medication starts, or these other things start getting justified to just have another drink, and it just builds up and it snowballs. And I've just seen people with these incredible lives in recovery spiral out of control and end up worse than where they've ever been. And I mean, the amount of people, and you may know a lot too, but the amount of people where it's happened like that who are not alive anymore, it is so large. And it's not just heroin that's killing people, it's cocaine, it's alcohol, it's all of these different drugs, that has killed so many people that I know. I think I was in treatment with about 50 people, I want to say. Over half of them are no longer alive, because of justifying, just one more, and it just turns into their last one, and that's it. And I've just, I fully understand that, and so it's just not even worth giving drinking or using anything a second thought to me.
I hear you on that. And I was going to ask you, of the group of people that you were really connected to when you were in treatment, so half of those people are no longer with us. And do you stay in touch with, are the ones that are with us, are they sober? Did they make it too?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people I'm still friends with, at least on Facebook, and every now and then, we'll catch up, see how everything's going with each other. And it's so amazing. I mean, to see, really, these people, been a big part of my life. I'll never forget them. And they were there right from the beginning, and I was there for them right from the beginning. And so, we're lifelong friends, that's for sure. It feels good.
Oh, does it? I'm sure that feels good. It's such a tribe that you created. I mean, there's nothing like those kinds of connections. I think for anybody that has some experience in recovery, when you really go from being sober to living a life in recovery, like you talked about, you don't want to give that up. It's so good over here. when I was just sober and white knuckling it for a long time and just sort of imagining that this was my life and it felt boring and bland and it didn't feel whole, that's when I think that feeling of maybe I can just have one. And I did. I relapsed 4 years after quitting drinking. And it didn't last very long because it lasted less than 2 weeks, because I remember one morning, the last day that I ever drank, and I looked in the mirror and I couldn't bring my eyes to my eyes in the mirror because I was so ashamed of what I had done, because I thought, you've worked your ass off to get to where you are and you know where you can go. You know, you can either keep going forward or you can just completely revert backward. And I just made that choice in that moment to really keep pushing forward. And I'm so glad I did, because I really realized what I was missing was community. And that's such a big part of what we need in recovery, is to have that sense of community. So I'm so glad you had it right away. And I find that that's a really powerful piece when it comes to people thinking about going to treatment as a recovery tool. I think that that's really important, that's a big piece of it, is that sense of community that you have. Now, I also want to touch on health and fitness has been a huge part of your recovery. It was my entire recovery for those first early years. And so for me, I hadn't focused on my nutrition or my fitness. I barely set foot in a gym, really. I wasn't somebody that did that. And so for me, going to a gym for the first time and really learning how to exercise and working with a trainer and reading voraciously on nutrition and learning about what my body needed, it was huge. I transformed my body. I learned to revere it and to honor it. And I didn't connect with the philosophy, I guess, that is, hey, you've quit drinking, you know, fuck, have the cookie, have the brownie, have whatever you want to eat. And I did that. I ate the ice cream for about 2 weeks when I first quit drinking. And that's what I did. I transferred my addiction from alcohol to sugar. And I did, I realized this isn't living. This isn't the way that I want to do this. So for me, getting into health and fitness and working on my nutrition and caring about my body and treating it like the temple that it is was huge for me. And I know that it was for you. So tell us about when you decided to get into that. So were you, I know that you were saying as a kid, you might've been a little overweight. Were you always into health and fitness throughout your teen years and while you were active in your addiction, or did that only happen in recovery?
Well, really, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but like I was still so insecure about any fat on my body. And so when I was going through high school, I was only eating like salad and that was it, because I didn't want more fat on my body. I dropped down to 120 some pounds. So I had, really an eating disorder at that point because of my body image. And, I then after high school started working out a little more, because in high school, actually, we had a strength training class. We also had multiple nutritional classes. And, it taught me a little bit more about what I should be eating and what I should be doing. So, I'd work out in my room, do some push-ups and sit-ups. And really that, was kind of a bit it all throughout, college and, the very end of high school. And so I did actually take some psychology courses in the short period of time that I was in college. And although, I learned about denial, I was clearly in denial the whole time. But I learned a lot of other very valuable information through that and through my health and strength training courses in high school. I had, a lot of knowledge about, what someone who is dependent on drugs or alcohol would need to do in order to, basically boost their endorphins back into their brain. And, for those of you who don't know what those are, basically they're the feel-good chemicals. They're what makes you feel good. They also, minimize pain. And I don't know if it's oxytocin to be exact. But, yep. They're what we produce naturally. The thing is, when we're dependent on drugs and alcohol, that's what produces those. That's what gives us that feel good. That's what numbs the pain. As soon as we stop that, our body hasn't been able to naturally produce that for so long that it does not know how yet, unless you take care of your health and fitness. And so that's what I learned, throughout those different courses in college and high school. So from day one, in treatment, I knew that in order for me to feel good and not get overly, depressed and anxious, which runs in my depression and anxiety runs rampant through my, family. I knew that I was going to have to get my heart pumping, basically. And so every chance I got, I think we had like an hour or half hour after lunch that we had free time to really do anything. We could, go outside and do some recreation. Or sometimes I would go into my room and I would really start doing push-ups. I would really start doing sit-ups. Whenever we did have lunch, I was eating the healthiest things that I could there. And I knew, of course, still it wasn't going to be easy in the beginning, and I was going to have these fluctuations of, emotions and mood. But I knew that, and I knew that was just going to be part of this process. And I pushed forward anyway with working out and eating healthy. And, by the time the few weeks that I was done with treatment, at that point, it basically formed those habits. And so I continued that and went way deeper into it outside of treatment. And I started feeling good and I started feeling better. And my body, was naturally producing those endorphins once again. And, I think that's what got me through those initial struggles that, a lot of people have, because we heavily crave sugar once we quit, especially alcohol, but other drugs as well. And that really is something, I mean, sugar is more addictive than cocaine, I think studies show.
Eight
And
times, 8 times more addictive.
that's insane. And I believe it because I had those same cravings, but I knew if I fell to sugar, that would just be trading one addiction really for another. And, people want to discount the severity of, the issues of sugar. But it causes so many problems in our lives that are, they're, they're going to affect us for the rest of our lives too. And, it causes that depression. And, boosts our anxiety, things like that, I knew might lead to me just flipping out and, losing out on my recovery. So yeah, I mean, that became huge. And then come the next year, 2014, I was still smoking cigarettes up to that point. I decided that I wanted to get in the best shape of my entire life. I wanted to see if I could win a legitimate athletic trophy, which I had never done in my entire life. And I thought it would feel good to say I won this trophy or this medal. And so what I decided to do to help me get off of cigarettes, I immediately signed up for something called Tough Mudder. And I knew that wasn't something I was necessarily going to win a legitimate trophy for, but I knew it would be fun. It's, a 12-mile mud in, uh, mud obstacle course, basically. That's not easy. And so I signed up for it first thing 2014. Yeah. And I put down cigarettes. I threw the rest away. And let me tell you that coming off of cigarettes was a much worse, I think, withdrawal than alcohol and the other drugs that I was using. I was so irritable and angry all the time for that first week, and it made me, physically sick. It was similar to having a cold. But again, I use that same frame of mind that I used going into my recovery. I'm able to, it's great that we can use our past experiences of triumph to get us through this next obstacle. So that was the mindset I had. I know it's going to suck for the next few weeks, but it's going to be so worth it once I am in this great athletic shape and might be able to win a trophy. So yeah, I just started going hard. I started running, which I hated running, but it takes about 3 weeks to form a habit. And so I knew that after 3 weeks of running, I might start being okay with it. And, voila, it started happening. I started, enjoying running. It was part of my normal daily routine. I was, going to the gym multiple days a week on top of the running. And I was, feeling great, better than I ever had in my entire life. So, went through the Tough Mudder. I signed up for a couple more races. And then the last big race in 2014 that I ran was a 5 mile. It was called like the 5 Mile Firecracker. It's this huge race that's out in the middle of nowhere in Ohio. And I knew that people from all over the country came in. This is where college athletes were, Ironman athletes were. This is where high school, track athletes were. I knew this was a big one, and I really wanted to win something. And I ran my heart out, and as hard as I ever had before. And the whole time, I had in mind the struggles that I've been through and have overcome. Let's get over this one. Let's just run as hard as we possibly can. And, it's just like me deciding to go to treatment. Let's, just run through the wall as hard as you possibly can. Put your head down and just get through it. And I won third place in that. And that was a legitimate trophy. And I felt unbelievable about it. And so, I think just those little things such as that are so worth going after. And in the process, you're building your health and you're producing those endorphins and you're feeling good. And it helps out with so many other issues in life that, I wish more high schools and more, elementary schools taught this, because, most people don't have any nutrition courses or strength training courses in their high school. I found that out while I was in treatment. I was like, yeah, I remember taking this nutrition course, and most of the people there are like, what? You had a nutrition course?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I was very blessed to have those. But I think, it's just apparent to me now more than ever that, we need a change in our school system, and it needs to be focused more on our physical health, which ties directly with our mental health.
I could not agree with you more. Every single word that you have said, I am just nodding away. I don't want to interrupt. And I'm just like, yes, it's absolutely what we need in our school systems. I live in Canada, as you know, you're in the US, and absolutely, we have got to revolutionize what we value. I mean, yes, math is important, geography, we need to know where places are in the world, but let's get back to basics and remember why we're here in the first place, which, is to help us get closer to who we really are. And I think that when we continue to take ourselves away from who we really are, using drugs, alcohol, sugar, sex, and social media, all of this other crap that's going on, the news, everything, we just keep taking ourselves out of the game. We keep taking ourselves away from who we really are and what our life purpose is. And I do think that one of the best ways, easiest ways really, to get closer to who we really are and to what our life purpose is to selfishly take time and focus inward. And that can be running this 5-mile race, and congratulations on third place. That is incredible. That is a huge achievement. But it might be, doing yoga. It might be practicing some, might be running. It might be spinning. It doesn't matter. But I think that the people that out there that say, it's not important, really haven't connected to it yet. And once you do, there's no looking back. I think that there's nobody out there in the world that finally finds health and fitness in a way that can change their trajectory, that doesn't then say it means it's everything. It's the foundation for so many other things. I think that really when we take care of ourselves, yes, we need to get sober. We need to put the drugs and alcohol down. We need to, to take out those addictive substances that are holding us back. But until and unless we get connected with our bodies, really as a structure, as a physical body, because you're so right, what we put into our bodies, it totally affects how we think and how we behave. So we eat a ton of sugar, we get that dopamine rush, and then we come crashing back down, and all we want is more, more, more. If we want to say that, sugar is not a drug, I mean, I want to argue that, because if the hallmarks of addiction are tolerance and withdrawal, we get both of those. If anybody's tried to go off sugar, I've written a book that, when anybody tries to go 28 days without eating sugar, believe me, it's not easy. So, anyway, I couldn't agree with you more with that, with the focusing on our health. What I'm also really hearing from you is how goal-oriented you are. And not everybody has that kind of, get up and go. Not everybody has that type of ability to set a goal and to go ahead and achieve it. What would be, if you can think of it, your advice to somebody who hasn't been goal-oriented ever in their life? How can they maybe set maybe a smaller goal and then work towards it? Not everybody's going to have the kind of drive that you have. What could somebody do to maybe get themselves on a better path if they're struggling?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I think focus on the fact that, it takes about 21 days to create a habit. And part of becoming goal-oriented is habitually, coming up with goals or trying to come up with goals. And so it's a process before you actually become a goal-oriented person. I was not, when I started out, but I knew that I would have to form this sort of habit and start doing what the other people who are now goal-oriented people were doing. And so that's what I started doing. Okay, so one of the big things I wanted to look at kind of every area of life. So like relationships, family, financial, business, health, fitness, all of these, different aspects of life itself, and then break down, what kind of goals would be in there. Relationship might be go on a date with someone you've never gone on a date before, or it can be romance, trying new things that you've never tried out before. So look at, I'd say write things out. Writing things down, for me has been the best kind of habit that I've been able to get into. I never wrote any things down before treatment, but I started doing that, and it helped me, kind of retain that memory better, and helped me keep certain things in the back of my mind. And it also helped me brainstorm new ideas. And so I think, write down all of these possibilities, or what are, these other people who maybe you look up to in life are doing that you would also like to do. It could be travel. And, all of a sudden you've got all of these, bigger goals. Then try to break them down, and figure out what you can do each and every day to kind of move closer to that goal. I think another big thing is having a vision board. So if you're looking through a magazine and you see maybe a particular car, or you see a certain location and say like Maui, a picture of that, cut it out, put it somewhere that you can see, so that every single day, maybe it's on your fridge, you're looking at your fridge and you see this beautiful island picture. That's the destination that you want to go, and that's something you want to accomplish, and you'd love to be able to tear that off, once you do accomplish that goal, and say, I did it. And so, if it is, say, travel, what are the things that, can get you there? Of course, money. You need money in order to travel. How much? Figure out how much you think it would take for you to travel to that place. Okay, how much would you need to save, say, every day? What changes can you make in your life? Are you going out to eat a lot? That costs a lot of money. And, I want to bring this to one of my biggest goals in my entire life was to move to Florida. I wanted to be around the palm trees and the beaches. I wanted to be able to drive across, the state for 3 hours and be in like a whole new paradise. So, what I did, it was actually within 3 months of making a decision to actually move to Florida before I was able to. And I didn't have a ton of money saved up. But what I did is I started using a crock pot. So one, I could, kind of manage what I was eating so I could eat healthy. But also, I'm spending $30 at the store, and I could eat for an entire week off of that. So, instead of spending $30 5 times a week or however many times I was going out, the amount of money I was able to save just from doing that was enough for me to move all of my belongings and my entire life down to Florida a year and a half ago. So
that's amazing.
That's kind of how I break down.
Yeah, I think so many of us don't put that together, that it's those small little changes that you can make on a daily basis, just those small habitual changes that really add up to something huge. So I really liked what you said about creating a vision board. That's something that I really enjoy doing as well. In fact, I have like a book where it'll be one page will be travel, and another page will be career, and another page will be, and it's almost like a scrapbook that I keep that way. So that's a fun way to do it too. And I was also imagining, when you were talking about writing things down and goals that you want to set, almost drawing like a wheel, and then having cogs in the wheel where it's family, career, relationships, money, business, and then writing sort of the big goal at the outer edge, and then working your way back with those smaller goals of things that you can do as milestones along the way to track your progress and keep you motivated and keep you accountable. So I think those are really great tips from you. I really want to touch on your work now. So you started Sober Evolution. I want to hear about that. And you're also working at an awesome treatment center that's got a holistic approach called Coalition Recovery. So you go ahead and decide which one you want to talk about first.
Sure. So yeah, Sober Evolution, it was just a spur of the moment kind of idea. I thought the name was cool. But what I had been doing, I had actually been working with some business coaches and really surrounding myself around these very motivated, inspiring people And they were like, this is what we're doing. We're reading personal development books. As boring as that may sound, that's what we're doing, and it's helping us achieve our business goals. And so I was like, huh, okay, well, I guess I better start picking up reading, which again, I hated reading before. I was terrible at it. I, was diagnosed with ADHD when I was like 18, when I was trying to get, Adderall at the time. But I was diagnosed with it. And, my mind's always constantly running and things like that. So every time I would try to read a paragraph, like I wouldn't retain what I was reading, and I'd have to read it over and over and over and over again. But I knew that maybe I could form this habit too of being able to retain, what I was reading. So someone gave me the book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Very famous. I mean, if you ask anybody who is really, truly, doing some pretty incredible things in life, they've probably read that book before. Written, 100 some years ago, but it's the principles of success that are universal, they're never ending, so it completely pertains to life today. Started reading that, it took me a while to really start being able to retain it, but, over a few weeks, I was really getting everything down. I was taking notes from that book at the time, and certain quotes I would come across really changed the way I looked at life itself. It changed my philosophies, and it started helping me form these new habits that were really bettering my life, benefiting my life in so many ways. And just one quote being able to do that and completely veer my life in a completely different direction, how can I give that back to people? Obviously, these people are writing these books because they want you to have that information. They want you to succeed. It's not because they want a paycheck for you buying their book, which I always thought before. It's because they want to see you succeed. And that's what I started realizing through reading these books, is that these people are giving away all their secrets. They just want to see people live a better life. And so that's when I started paying more attention. More of these quotes started pouring in and really benefiting my life. So come 2016, so 2 years ago, I decided to create this Instagram. I thought, maybe this is it can be a good way to, get these things out there. Maybe the right person can come across one of these quotes that have benefited my life, and maybe it can benefit their life too. It'll be well worth me creating an Instagram for. Plus, it'll help me, kind of log in all of these quotes. So if I need, a pick me up that day, I can scroll through my feed and I can remind myself of this one thing that helped me out. So I started uploading all these, quotes that, I was either creating, quoting these people, or, finding on the internet or whatever. And Sober Evolution just exploded. People were like, this is, the greatest, sobriety page that I've come across on Instagram. And they were sharing it, and they were telling, me how much just that quote that they've never heard before has greatly affected the way that they look at certain things. If someone's going through an emotional struggle, and then you see this quote that kind of helps get through that, it can potentially save a life. And, so that's why so many people were reaching out to me. I was kind of using it, or I still do use it, as a blog today. So I tell part of my story with that. How does that quote, tie into my life? And so now people are really able to relate their story to mine, and then understand that quote further. So it just grew. And like you said earlier, certain people would reach out to me that before I would be like, oh my gosh, this is like a huge celebrity, or this is a major news network or something. But then kind of through that, you realize we're all people too, and we're all trying to better our lives, and help our families and friends, and help build the world. And so we're all in this together. And so, like, I'm not like this nervous wreck when I'm around, these people. And it helped me kind of overcome some of the fears too that, I had at that point. Cause, when I stopped drinking and doing drugs, I was back to being that shy 15-year-old kid again. So I had to kind of revamp and start these new habits. So, the Instagram, believe it or not, helped me kind of be able to come outside of my comfort zone and not be afraid to shake a hand with someone who is, reading a similar book to what I was reading in the coffee shop, or someone who's wearing a suit and looks like a CEO, someone who walks out of a Ferrari. Like, it would have been terrifying, never would have, approached those people. But today it's like, it's not even a thought in my head. I want to find out how that guy got that Ferrari, or how that person's traveling the world. Like, tell me. And they're always open books, so that fear is just completely irrelevant, and it's never true. But that's what Sober Evolution is. And now I've been able through it to partner with, I don't know if you know who Anna David is. She's a New York Times bestselling author, very motivational and energetic, and we started Light Hustler Evolution, which kind of goes into what we were talking about. But it's a paid membership group that's all about finding out what goals are, or how to find goals, and then understanding the accountability piece. And we're all accountable to each other, and all accomplishing goals. So it's like this ultra motivated group, or that people are stepping into who might not be motivated, and we all just build each other up. So that's kind of what it's turned into, is like this almost coaching platform as well. And I've been able to coach people one-on-one who I've met through Sober Evolution. And so that's kind of what it is. It's a whole bunch of different things geared towards helping people.
I think it's so incredible, because as you've been talking early on, you mentioned the Lord of the Rings and the quest. And I just keep picturing in my mind Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. And I feel that is so relatable to people when they think about recovery and going to treatment. And when you were saying that these people that write books, they're not just doing it to collect the paycheck, they're really doing the work of writing a book because they do want to share a message with the world. And that's what the hero's journey is. That's what Lord of the Rings is, right? We've got that one protagonist that goes along, and you're with the group, and then all of a sudden you separate from the group, you go to treatment, and then you do the work that you have to do, and then you come back to the group and share all of that amazing knowledge that you've gained while you've been away on your quest. And yeah, I see a movie in your future. I see all sorts of things. I think the work that you're doing is incredible. The people that you're helping, the numbers you'll never even know, because you don't know how many people read that Instagram and go to Sober Evolution and take a look at something that just resonates with them at the right moment. They say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I am sure you've been a teacher in more people's lives than you'll ever be able to quantify. So tell us about your work at Coalition Recovery. What do you do there? And tell us a little bit about the center itself.
Yeah, so really, I'm helping them right now with their outreach, and trying to form relationships with others throughout Florida, all over the country actually. And so it's interesting. I mean, it's a pretty new type of job for me, but it's one that I enjoy. I enjoy reaching out to people, forming these really solid relationships, and kind of binding it all together so that we're working as a team towards solving this substance abuse epidemic as a whole. I mean, there's been issues with treatment centers before where it's all competition, but things have to change, and they are starting to change big time, especially here in Tampa and really all over Florida. I mean, if you've seen news programs, there's all these awful places all over Florida. But the thing is, right now, the ethical people, the people who really truly have this passion to help people in recovery, or help people reach recovery, I mean, we are bonding together like I've never seen anywhere else in any other industry before, working as a team. And so that's basically what I get to do for Coalition Recovery. And what's really interesting about Coalition is they're dual diagnosis, so co-occurring disorders. And the main focus is we're not just trying to help you understand addiction. Like, that's not what this is about. We want to help figure out what led up to addiction. What were those early childhood traumas that led up to it? Let's try to help you as a whole instead of just one aspect of your life. And that goes right back to my own experience. I had to understand what led to my addiction. And it was that moment of just being picked on just that first time. That was really that first moment that really hurt my self-image, that later led to me enjoying alcohol and drugs so much that it eventually became an addiction. So I love that that's what they focus on, and they have this incredible program just for figuring out those things. And, a lot of us don't even know what those traumas were until we work with someone who, kind of is able to pull that out of us. And it's such an amazing thing once you realize what that thing is, and then now you've got an action plan on how to solve it. So yeah, I mean, we start off with a detox, and we have PHP, which is partial hospitalization, and then we have intensive outpatient. And on top of that, we have something called a Renaissance program, which I love too. It ties in so much, I think, with my own experience. This Renaissance program, basically, we're partnering with all these different universities from all over the country, and what we're doing is helping reintegrate our patients, if they choose to go through the Renaissance program, back into college or to college for the first time. And we're really trying to lead them in the right direction to be able to find employment that they need, in case you are unemployed. For instance, I got laid off while I was in treatment. I didn't have a job coming out of treatment, and that's a huge struggle all over the country. Obviously, is the money aspect. Well, let's figure out how to get you back on your feet, and let's point you in the right direction towards finding out how to solve those issues, as well as so many other issues. So the Renaissance really is focused on building life. So let's ensure that you have long-term recovery instead of just going to treatment and you're out, and then you got to figure out everything else by yourself.
That is brilliant. That is so needed. It's something that my father went to treatment and he left, and he was just told to do 90 and 90 AA meetings in 90 days. And
he did not.
Yep. And he did not do that. And he relapsed within days of coming out of treatment. And it was so disappointing because he had been there for at least 30 days. I think it's going to be it was probably 60 days. If I think back, he passed away 5 years ago, but I'm really glad that he went to treatment. I'm glad that he got that chance to go a little deeper with, the issues and the traumas that had sort of led him down the path. But what I know for sure is that the aftercare was really missing for him. He did not have any support other than in the rooms, and it wasn't a place that he connected with. It just didn't work for the right way for him, or he didn't work it the right way, I guess. But yeah, so I really appreciate what Coalition Recovery is doing. I love this Renaissance program. It sounds excellent.
Yeah, the Renaissance program, I mean, it's very unique. I don't know of too many places that are actually doing that. I know of some really solid, like, sober living homes that do have these kind of relationships and are helping the everybody get back into society, so with jobs and college, and helping them build their lives. But it's not very common in the more inpatient treatment style. So I don't know of too many off the top of my head who actually have this reintegration into college like we do. And so we're hoping that this really spreads, because we've been able to see so many success stories as far as people getting into college, getting their doctorate, going for their law degree. I mean, these incredible careers and so much success in long-term recovery, which is very rare. I mean, it's like 18% or something like that, or maybe it's 8% actually stay in long-term recovery after going to treatment. But we're trying to figure out, and we all are collectively, I think, especially here in Florida with that kind of core group that I'm talking about, trying to figure out, the best ways to ensure long-term recovery. So it's not just this, revolving door coming back and forth back into treatment again, because, in the process, so many people are dying from that one relapse. And so, yeah, it really is honorable, I think, to be a part of, this organization. I mean, the people that work there are incredible. A lot of us working there are in recovery ourselves, and so it's just this passion that we have to give back. And it's just such an amazing thing to be a part of. I mean, I just wouldn't change it for the world. So Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Well, you're clearly in the right place. And it reminds me of Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill writing. I don't know if this was one of your quotes that you wrote down, but the one where he talks about who better than the alcoholic to help the person struggling with alcohol? Who better than the person, having this experience, helping somebody else who is going through that tough time? So I imagine that your coaching clients, really connect with you. I imagine that the people at the center are I know that you're not necessarily directly working with the patients there, but I imagine that you see them on a regular basis. And, I can just imagine that this is such a collaborative and a supportive environment that you get to experience every day as part of your work. It's awesome what you're doing, Austin. Honestly, I'm thrilled to know you. I'm honored to know you. I'm so glad you spent this time with me today. Thank you so much for sharing your personal story and for helping us understand treatment centers and what all happens there, and sharing a little bit about your health and fitness journey. That was really interesting to me. I definitely want people to grab onto that. If there's one thing, I remember Tim McGraw, he got into wicked shape when he got sober, and he said, if you can grab onto health and fitness in recovery, you're going to go a long way to really improve the rest of your life, no matter what else happens. There's nothing, nobody ever gets sad about the fact that they've taken time to care about what they're putting in their body and how they're treating it and how they're moving it, and setting those goals is just so awesome. It's so key. It just really helps us to turn this into, from being just people that are sober to living in recovery in a healthy, whole way. And you are a model of what that can look like.
To get access to all of the free videos and interviews, visit sobrietystartshere.com.